All right, so the next hit delay changes, obviously empower a ton of different builds and make them very strong. But what they also do is make this absolute menace of a proc build a possibility now, considering it used to quite literally interrupt its own damage the vast majority of the time. And when everybody is sitting there complaining about Mosaic Assassin just being too much of an eyesore, I say you didn't know how good you had it until they changed next hit delay, and all of a sudden this volcano maniac comes strolling into your game and starts clearing through all of your cows. But what we are looking at right now is the destruction proc volcano druid. I'm not gonna try to tell you that it's good, in a how quickly it clears content type of way, but it's gotta be arguably the coolest build I've ever seen or piloted in the game. So you know what? Let's just get straight into it. First off, that's the coolest looking druid that you've ever seen ever in the entire history of Diablo 2. If nothing else about this build, that's the dopest looking druid character model I've ever seen. But in more seriousness, let's go ahead and break down the build, the skills, the items that I'm using, the Mercenary. So in case you want to try this yourself before the season goes live, you absolutely can. Now, just as a quick forewarning, it can clear Players 8. It's very slow. It was doing okay in Players 3. Obviously, if you were farming somewhere other than cows, like in the pit or the stony tomb, it would do much better, don't get me wrong. But realistically, this is just like a Players 1 meme build in case you had a couple extra high runes kicking around that you felt like wasting. The primary thing to understand about the build is that with the changes to next hit delay, this volcano proc here means that every single time volcano drops down, it can now deal damage, whereas previously each volcano would block the other volcanoes. And not only that, there's two different damage components to volcano that both block each other. So now at the very least, when one volcano's physical damage is happening, the other volcano's fire damage can be happening, and vice versa. And the other big change is the fact that it also casts Nova. And the funny part is that Nova also has next hit delay. So previously, when you would get the Nova proc and the Volcano proc, the Nova would come out doing basically no damage and stop the Volcano from doing damage the entire time until that next hit delay timer went down. And if you keep procking Nova, you keep ignoring the Volcano damage. So just in those two parts right there, this item is already better, at least in a meme way it's better. Again, it's not a great weapon, it's kind of decent for melee, but at least these two major components are no longer blocking each other from being able to do damage. And because of that, since we on the Druid can synergize Volcano, which also gets us the benefit of being able to run a very high level Armageddon, we create a pretty decent small AoE density clearing build here. So let's take a look at the rest of the gear that I think most suits this playstyle. Flickering Flame right off the bat makes complete sense. You could also use Metamorphosis for that Druid buff that you get, Jalal's just to be a better melee attacker. Or you could even use like a multifaceted helmet here for more percentage damage. But I do think that Flickering Flame, just like pound for pound, is the easiest one to toss on and not need to worry about survivability. We are using Enigma. You can use basically anything here, but I do think that the Enigma, to be able to travel to our farming locations, vastly outweighs the benefits of like any other armor that you would wear on the build. But it's Enigma. Everybody uses Enigma. It's kind of, the rest of this gear, like keep in mind, this is a ridiculously high investment build for a very meme output. So don't take it too seriously, but there you go. There's an Enigma. We're using High Lords. I was thinking that we would do a decent amount of physical damage with this build, and in reality, I just think we kind of don't. So in actuality, I'd rather put more plus skill here, or maybe even like an Atmas to be able to apply amplified damage. Since half of Volcano's damage is physical damage, that might help out a little bit better. But the Deadly Strike is kind of like, it's whatever. The plus to skill, the increased attack speed. We are using Phoenix for the massive amount of minus enemy res, along with the massive amount of physical damage. Since we are building Destruction in a Phase Blade, it's kind of difficult to stack enough enhanced damage to make it a good melee option, and Phoenix goes a long way to help that. And then the Redemption Aura also goes a long way to help us with survivability. And then obviously, it also casts Firestorm. And since we are putting in a ton of synergies, the Firestorm damage is kind of like okay. It's another added little benefit of like mini AoE density clearing potential. So it's just a perfect fit. I can't think of a better shield here. We're using Gore Riders. You might just want to swap over to Goblin Toes for a better amount of crushing blow. But again, I was going for some semblance of an actual good physical damage build here. So the Deadly Strike in the open wounds helps for boss kill speed and overall damage output. Using a Carrion Wind for the Twister proc, the Twister helps to apply stun, which just kind of keeps monsters in the AoE of our Volcano, Armageddon, Firestorm more easily, and then has good life stolen per hit. Raven Frost for the Cannot Be Frozen, Lava Gout for the Enchant on Striking for more attack rating, also just like Keck W, more fire damage. And then we are using Nosferatu's for survivability. Any survivability option here would make sense, or even just an Arachnid's Mesh so that we teleport faster on swap. Obviously, Call to Arms with the Spirit, we are going to teleport on swap. We're also going to cast Werewolf on swap, since this is the most plus to skills that our build has, and we want the highest level Werewolf for the most attack speed and just higher skill level in general. Across the bottom, absolutely disgusting Skiller Charms with All Res and Magic Find, Perfect Annie, Perfect Torch, as well as the Fire Sunder Charm. We did bring it into Chaos Sanctuary, where it was doing okay on players 1. On any higher player settings, it was getting absolutely trounced. Do not bring it in there, but it was like okay. And then this also helps in case any of the cows happen to get immune to fire for our testing purposes. You probably would want to bring this build into areas with no fire immunes, or fire immunes that are easily broken with the Conviction Aura, as well as our Flickering Flame reducing their resistances post Sunder Charm break. So any area that's good for that. Talrash's Tombs and Stony Tombs come to mind as just like places that this build would actually do very well in, including the Pit. For the skills, you got a couple options here for how you want to maximize it, but you need to remember that Volcano synergizes with Molten Boulder, Armageddon, and Fissure, and not only that, but Armageddon also benefits from maxing out Fissure for its duration and Molten Boulder for its damage. So bare minimum, the 20 points here, 20 points here, 20 points here. We don't need to put any points into Firestorm because the Firestorm proc doesn't look at our skill level, as well as the Volcano proc doesn't look at our skill level. So you don't need to put any points into those. We didn't pick up any summons. You kind of just don't have enough points, and this is a level 99 character, and I still didn't have enough points. And then for shapeshifting, I did max out Werewolf as well as Fury, and I put my dumb points in Lycanthropy for more life. When we are fully battle commanded and battled orders up, and then we cast our Werewolf, on our primary swap, we have over 4,000 life and about 600 mana. Put in enough strength to be able to use our gear, and then I put in enough dexterity to reach 50% block with a Monarch, which also helps with our attack rating to be able to hit monsters. But the fact that you can silent block in the middle of a Fury animation means that you're basically getting a ton of survivability without having to deal with the animation of blocking. So I think even going max block on this build might be a really good way of just like outputting the maximum amount of DPS possible so that you're never getting put into hit recovery and you're able to survive. But then the rest of the points go into Vitality. For the Mercenary, we are using Infinity, again, helping our chances to hit, especially against boss monsters, and then also the Conviction Aura to increase our fire damage, considering that's trying to be our primary damage output. Right now, I think it's kind of half and half. When we have all of our volcanoes going and Firestorm and Armageddon, fire is definitely the biggest damage component for the build. And then when those procs haven't happened yet, the actual physical damage from Fury is what carries us. So you'll see that our Fury damage is only about 3,000, which definitely is not great. But on players 1, it's more than enough. We did try out a Fire Claws version of this build that actually got up to like 14k Fire Claw damage, and single target damage was really good, and that felt a lot better in higher player count. But since we were going more for this meme destruction Volcano proc, Fury was the only way to really accomplish that. I do think you can take this exact same thing and just build it again as Fire Claws and then fully synergize into that instead, and you probably actually do pretty good because Fire Claws is a pretty good build. And all the gear that we're wearing is basically what you wear on a Fire Claws build, sans the weapon, where you would typically use something like Hand of Justice. And then obviously we're using a Might or a Mercenary here with Andes and Fortitude. And like, do I think the build's good? Absolutely not. No, this is what you build when you go, oh, I guess I have an extra low burr and jaw sitting around, and this 5-socket phase blade just dropped. But it was funny to see like whether or not it was more viable now, and the answer is definitely yes. It is more viable now. Like, it is a better option in general than it used to be. I still think that destruction has a very long way to go before it's like quote unquote a good weapon, but it's definitely not a terrible one, and now it's slightly better. And especially for meme builds like this, where they were always kind of like super fringe, or like you kind of just laughed at them. Now, at the very least, they're not stepping on their own toes with next hit delay, and you can actually get the benefits for all of the absolute screen vomit PoE levels of particle effects that are on at any given time, and you're at least getting some of the damage out of it that you would expect. So I'm really excited about that. This is definitely one of the builds I was kind of the most excited to try out once I started thinking about what on-striking effects are in the game. You might have already seen the Windhammer Fury Druid, which is actually just like good. Like not great, but good. And this one was the next logical outcome of what should we try next. So I hope that you enjoyed the build. It might inspire you to try out something interesting with any, laying around runes that you might have walking into the off season. And I thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.